I would now like to invite my fellow Thai Silicon Valley board member, Kamal Anand, to introduce our grand keynote speakers. Kamal Anand's last company, Asperia, was acquired through the pandemic by Intrado, where he now serves as the Senior Vice President of Healthcare. Kamal is a serial entrepreneur, Thai board member, and a past chair of the Thai 50 program. Over to Kamal.
Welcome to the session, Orchestrating a Unicorn Exit. Many entrepreneurs these days have the desire and the ambition to build unicorns. Razat Gaurav, CEO of LLamasoft, is one such entrepreneur who made it happen. LLamasoft was the leader in AI-based supply chain design and decisioning software, and late last year was acquired by Coupa for $1.5 billion. Razat was recognized by Goldman Sachs as one of the 100 most intriguing entrepreneurs of 2020. We look forward to hearing about his journey. Joining him in conversation is Nehal Raj. Nehal is a partner at TPG based in San Francisco and co-leads the firm's investment activities in software and technology. He serves on the boards of C3AI, Noodle AI, Wind River, amongst others. And he also serves on the board of trustees at San Francisco Day School and the advisory board of Breakthrough San Francisco. Please welcome Razat and Nehal.
Thank you, Thai team, for the introduction. It's really great to be here as part of TiEcon, and it's a pleasure to be here with a good friend, Razat Gaurav. And without further ado, I thought we'd go ahead and dive into our fireside chat. And Razat, maybe we could just start off for folks who aren't familiar. Just give us a little bit of background on LLamasoft. What does the company do? Where does it play? It'd be great to maybe start with that grounding.
Great, Nehal. Good to see you here, and thanks for TiEcon for the opportunity. So LLamasoft, we've been in the supply chain analytics and design space, so applying data and advanced algorithms to a whole regime of supply chain problems, all the way from sourcing into network design, into production, inventory, logistics. And we work with large enterprise organizations all around the world, and headquartered in Ann Arbor, Michigan, the home of the mighty Wolverines, but obviously with a global footprint, a global team, and a global customer base as well.
That's great. And look, under your leadership, LLamasoft did some incredible things, and TPG had the privilege of being an investor in the company, and so we got to see this firsthand. But in 3 years, LLamasoft doubled its revenues and ultimately sold in a very successful exit for $1.5 billion to a public SaaS company, Coupa. And you were there throughout that journey, Razat, and helped scale the business up and drive that outcome. It'd be great just to hear from you, and I'm sure the audience would love to hear this as well, just the key success ingredients from your perspective in terms of what led to that sort of outcome for the business.
Yeah, look, LLamasoft was already a very good company, built on a strong foundation and a very strong product vision. Part of the reason why I joined LLamasoft is I saw the building blocks that could be brought together to help reimagine the way the enterprise organizations were making decisions across their supply chain. So that was a thesis with which I joined the organization, and we reimagined the scope of problems we were trying to solve, from supply chain design problems, which were always very important and strategic for manufacturers, retailers, logistics companies, to really expanding the usage of the solution and democratizing the usage across the broader enterprise, and also in making decisions that were not just mid to long term, but also near term decisions. So that's the thesis with which we started. And so I'll say, as I reflect back, the first aspect of the success story at LLamasoft was, it was built and founded with a strong product vision. And as I came on board, that continued, and sort of, every plateau you reach, you've got to think, in a more ambitious way, in a more aspirational way. And that's exactly what we did. So we were still leveraging our core competency, our core capabilities, but building off of that. That was the first important step. The second important learning really was you can't do this alone. Our business, when I joined, we had about a little over 300 people. We scaled the business to almost 700 people. And the enterprise software business, it's a team sport, right? So, and I like to tell people, we don't own buildings, we don't own inventory, we don't manufacture products. Our biggest and only asset is the people. So talent, both talent retention and talent acquisition, was a very important aspect of scaling the business up. We spent a lot of time thinking about what are the key areas of expertise we need to bring to the table. Where do we need that domain knowledge? Where do we need the industry knowledge? Where do we need technical product or algorithmic expertise? And we curated the talent acquisition plan around that. We also did a lot to not take for granted that people just want to work for LLamasoft, right? And, our approach was, look, we know you can work anywhere. You can work at Amazon, Google, Facebook, given the core competencies, but you've chosen to work at LLamasoft, and we're going to make this a special place for you. So that whole recipe around employee success, plus the focus on customer success, which has been a key underpinning of the company in driving customer value. Those two things really is what earned us the right to have a big business success, right? So that I'll say is the second aspect of the learning. And the last one I'll say is the importance of mission, purpose, and culture, right? LLamasoft has always been a very mission and a purpose-driven organization. We've always been very proud of not only creating value for our customers, but in leveraging our expertise, our knowledge of the supply chain, our knowledge of supply chain design and analytics, and applying it to have broader impact. So in partnership with the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, or with the UNICEF or the World Health Organization, for several years now, this is even prior to the pandemic, we've been doing work that leverages our technology and our expertise, but really impacts people in underdeveloped countries, particularly around access to food, access to medical services, medical supplies, and also as it relates to the environment. So I think that sense of purpose really became a big sort of a motivator for the company. It became a big retention mechanism for the employees. It's good business. It's not just doing good for the world. It's also doing good business. And ultimately, we all woke up in the morning really proud of the work that we were doing. So those are the three ingredients I'll say that were very, very important. One is having a strong product orientation, really having a cohesive product strategy that you can execute against. Secondly, really having the focus and emphasis on employee success plus customer success yields business success. And thirdly, really having a foundation of strong mission, purpose, and culture that really allow you to execute beyond anyone else that you can imagine.
That's really helpful, Razat. And I think it's a good reminder, two of your three key success factors are kind of human-centric factors. All of the software businesses that we've been a part of, that we invest in, you get so focused on the product and, the automation of certain, business processes. But sometimes it's easy to forget that software businesses are run by humans. And it's really a people business, and the key asset of any of these companies is its talent. There's no hard assets at all. It's all soft assets. It's all talent oriented. And that's a probably good segue to the next question. We're over a year into COVID and all of the disruptions that have been caused both on the business side and people side over the last year. It'd be great to just understand how did the pandemic, impact your business, and again, just kind of key lessons learned navigating through that, not only managing to continue to grow through that pandemic, but also managing your human capital, as you've talked about, and then ultimately managing to sell your business in the middle of a pandemic. How did this all work out?
Yeah, as I reflect back on the past 12 months, I could have never envisioned it, dreamt about it, the way it sort of has panned out. But look, the first 2 months of the pandemic, were very unsettling. Right, there's no two ways about it. It kind of came very quickly once the virus spread beyond China into Japan and Italy. We very quickly, and we were sort of fairly early in late February to start really thinking about, retrenching and analyzing what impact could this have on the business, right? We were lucky that, much like most enterprise software companies, we work in a virtual environment. So transitioning from the physical office space to a virtual environment was very quick and very seamless, just like most companies. But then, what we saw in the first 2 months is a lot of our customers, who tend to be large manufacturers, retailers, third-party logistics companies, they were grappling with a lot of disruptions and uncertainty as well. So they kind of froze up on a lot of the projects and initiatives and opportunities that we were working with them on in the first 2 months. And that started the tailspin of, okay, we've got to model scenarios of how our business is going to get impacted, right? And we were doing this. I was actually exchanging notes with a lot of other CEOs in the enterprise software space, and everyone was going through the same exercises. And in fact, I've been through a lot of downturns in the past. We've had, big tech bubbles burst. We've had recessions in the past. But none of us have ever gone through anything like this. So there was no playbook to leverage. And so that's where I found some of the formal and informal networks to be very, very useful in exchanging notes, seeing what learnings others were having, and applying them appropriately to our business. So the first 2 months were unsettling. There was some softening in the deal flow, in the project execution as well. And we did a lot of scenario modeling and planning. At that point, we had some fairly spirited debates with our board, right, about which scenarios do we think we should be calibrating on, right? And this is where, having been in the supply chain space, scenario planning is a very core kind of a standard capability that most supply chain planning professionals engage in. And there's something in the supply chain space called postponement. So, you don't allocate your inventory till you're absolutely close to the point of demand. And that's been a key learning in navigating through uncertainties in a whole variety of industries. And that's what we ended up doing is we said, look, we'll calibrate on a conservative scenario. We'll take some actions to really, buckle up our balance sheet, make sure that we're not spending money that we don't absolutely need to. And we'll just tighten up our belt in every direction possible. But we're not going to go out there and start making massive 15, 20, 25% cuts. Because frankly, while on the one hand, we were seeing in the early parts of the cycle, a lot of customers were softening up and freezing up on initiatives and projects, starting with the third month, in June timeframe, what we found was all our customers were dealing with massive supply and demand disruptions in different ways, depending on the industries that they were in. And all of a sudden, our projects started really taking off. Our pipeline started taking off, and we had a complete reversal. So in some ways, the pandemic added a lot of tailwinds to our business, right? Mm-hmm. Because with all these supply and demand disruptions, we were right in the middle of that in helping our customers navigate through these complicated decisions and complicated times through a data-driven and analytical framework, right? So we were just really well situated at the right time, at the right place. And we had a record Q3, we had a record Q4, and frankly, 2020 was a fantastic banner year for us in terms of bookings, renewals, just about every metric that you look at from an enterprise SaaS company perspective. But if we had made the decision very early on to cut really deep, right, I think it would have been hard for us to be able to take advantage of the rebound we saw, just not like 6 months down the road, but just even like 2 to 2.5 months down the road. So that was an important learning, is that, and I'll extract this to say, be careful not to have knee-jerk reactions, right? Just like in a hype cycle, when bubbles build, everyone follows the herd, and everyone kind of starts doing sometimes illogical things. Similar things can happen in a down cycle, right? Where everyone just follows the herd, and you start creating a self-reinforcing vicious cycle. You got to step back and think about how these up cycles or down cycles apply to your business, right? And be a lot more specific and thoughtful about, what you're going to do and when you're going to do them. Because when you're navigating through uncertainty, you don't know exactly how things will pan out. So using that postponement techniques was very key. The second thing I found was, more on the human side is, by the way, the first 2 months for many people who were on the road was fantastic, right? You don't have to get on a plane. It was very productive. You're not dealing with commute times. But then, after a few months, we saw most people, including myself, as we were going from one Zoom call to another, we just lacked those spontaneous discussions that happen when you're meeting people, when you're in person, when, the sort of energy you feed off of each other, even when you're having a discussion over coffee time or on a whiteboard, right? Or you going and grabbing lunch or drinks after work. None of those opportunities existed because we were all in a lockdown mode, right? And so how you drive employee engagement in this fully virtual context was something that we had to really learn and be creative on, right? And again, there was no playbook for this. We had never existed as a company 100% virtual ever, and so we started really over communicating with the employees, because our employees were also dealing with a lot of uncertainty, right? There was all this negative news coming about the pandemic. There were some social, issues that were, coming to the fore because of certain incidents. Black Lives Matter, the movement was really building up. And these were all very important topics for our employees. And so there was a whole set of issues that were being grappled by the people. And we thought, we can't just, go about business with our quarterly all hands, right? We really made them very frequent. We started doing weekly all hands in the first few months, and then we reduced the frequency to every other week. And those all hands calls were extremely useful just to keep the employee base connected on a global basis, because ultimately every country in the world was dealing with a pandemic in some way, shape, or form. And what I found was, in this time of challenge and lack of engagement and sort of this uncertainty hovering over us, I found it was a great time for us to develop empathy as leaders, right? And for example, one of the folks on the team came up with the idea that, look, there's no more daycare, right? So all the kids are at home. Razat, why don't you conduct a virtual book reading for all the kids of the employees, and then we can invite all the kids and you read them a children's book, right? I would have never thought of that in normal times, right? But we did that. It was really successful, and people really appreciated that, right? We started doing things like, we created with all these back-to-back Zoom calls, we found that people were just going from one call to the next. And in some ways, there was a law of diminishing returns in terms of productivity, and there wasn't enough time to kind of step back and, do thinking type of work, right? So we put in place once a month, every first Monday of the month, sort of a no meeting Monday. So one Monday a month, we would just have no internal meetings whatsoever. It was a day to catch up. Of course, if you had customer obligations, if you had partner obligations, we all would need to keep those. But in terms of internal meetings, we just, had one full day of just catch up. And that was refreshing even for me as an individual, just to play catch up and do some thinking. So what I found was this was an incredible time to be creative and to develop empathy in the organization. And then the last thing I'll say is it was also a time to kind of step up the cliche, sort of the saying goes, when the tough, when the going gets tough, the tough get going. I mean, I saw that in action during the pandemic, and with all the uncertainty that our customers were dealing with all the disruptions, our team stepped up, and we really stepped up with new offerings for them. We stepped up with, helping our customers with staffing virtual war rooms because, their freight was stuck in transit from China or coming in from other parts of Asia or Europe. And so we just had an all-in kind of a mindset to this, right? We also stepped up and helped with, the whole challenge of, distributing PPE and the whole distribution and supply of medical supplies, right? And that's a big supply chain problem. And I think a lot of lessons have been learned around governance in that, but we were able to work and partner with certain agencies around the world and bring our expertise to that. So I think it was just a great time for people to step above and beyond their normal course of duty and have an impact on our business, but also the broader community.
Yeah, that makes sense. And again, it comes back to, in many ways, how you manage your people. And I think the key word you used there was empathy. And, a lot of the investments that you made in your workforce, whether it was No Meeting Monday or even the book reading for kids, maybe you read a supply chain book to the children. I think my sense is all of that pays back with a very high ROI, in terms of employee engagement and then ultimately the business success for you and for investors. And so I think it's just a key lesson that I fully agree with. Speaking of investors, TPG again had the privilege of being an investor in LLamasoft, and my partner Malta sat on the board of the company. It'd be great to hear how you managed the partnership with your investors and the partnership with your board, and any key lessons that you would share around making that a successful partnership. Because I'm sure many in the audience are in a similar situation, leading businesses, but also having to deal with investors and boards. From my perspective, outside in, that seemed to have gone very well, but maybe you can give a little bit more insider's perspective to that.
Yeah, that's a good question, Nehal. Look, I mean, Malta, who was the lead partner from TPG, and I were tied to the hip, right? And I think obviously it was important to have two-way transparency, accountability, and trust, right? I mean, ultimately, you need to build trust. But I think what's interesting is, I mean, TPG was our largest investor, as you know, but we also had Goldman Sachs and MK Capital, who are other institutional investors at LLamasoft, also represented on the board. But I think the relationship with TPG and the LLamasoft team was one where it was built on an expectation of transparency and accountability, as any investor management relationship should be built. But it was also built on a spirit of collaborative partnership, right? There wasn't an assumption by either side that we know how to do things better than you, right? Mm-hmm. And so very shortly after I came on board, we put together a multi-year strategic plan, right? A 3 to 5 year strategic plan as a leadership team, right? And we involved the board of the TPG team as part of that. And it was important not just to look at it from the perspective of, the numbers and the spreadsheets, but the how, right? Like, mm-hmm. What are we going to do in the product? What are we going to do with the go-to-market? What are we going to do on the customer success side? How are we going to really tie our employee success initiatives around these? Just all the basic fundamentals of the how in a multi-year context that allowed us to then put together a financial plan that we as a leadership team could defend and own and have accountability towards, right? And once we had that, it was really all about execution, right? And as we were executing, we always kept in touch. We always collaborated. And there, again, one of the lessons learned is, a firm like TPG, as you know, Nehal, has access to a lot of resources and a lot of infrastructure, and there's a broad ecosystem. But I think the key to really extracting value from that for a company, any individual portfolio company or LLamasoft, for example, LLamasoft, was that the leadership team needs to be very self-aware of where help is needed. Mm-hmm. Right? And when we were able to do that, when we were able to come to that point, that point of enlightenment of here is a self-awareness we have with, here are the few things we need help with, then we could go to the TPG team and ask for that help. And the TPG team was extremely responsive. And of course, I'll give you an example, right? We were redoing our entire SaaS pricing model, right? And because we were going from a product-centric sort of offering to more of a platform-centric offering. And, within the company, I didn't have any pricing experts, right? So we reached out to the TPG team, and the TPG team lined up an expert who has, 20 years of experience in pricing and particularly, SaaS pricing. And that was a hugely valuable resource to be able to leverage. But we didn't wait for TPG to tell us, okay, you, LLamasoft, need to work on pricing, right? It was us as leaders and part of the management team asking for that help. And then it worked really well. So I think that self-awareness is really important. I think obviously the transparency, I was as quick to share the bad news as I was to share the good news, right? And again, that's something I'd encourage all, leaders on this call to, as you think about how you want to interface with your board, right? I mean, the board, is made up of investors, and we have external, members as well, who were more operators in the board. But it was important that we had, and that's part of what built the trust. Right. So not everything is going to go perfect every day, of the week, or every day of the month, or every month of the year, or every quarter of your existence. Sometimes things go wrong, but the real test of the partnership comes in how you work through those times when things are not going perfect. And that's really when the test for the relationship and the partnership comes. And I think we were able to work through that really, really well. And the same thing happened as we were orchestrating the exit. And frankly, our timeline around the exit wasn't 2020, as you know, Nehal, right? Mm-hmm. It just so happened, we were focused on the fundamentals of creating value in the business, growing the business through an innovation-oriented offering. Coupa, to Coupa's credit, Coupa is obviously one of the most successful and one of the fastest growing enterprise software companies today. They pursued us and we engaged. The more we talked about, what their vision was and what their culture was, the more we realized that they'd be a very good fit. And then we were able to work out, the commercials in a way that was sensible for all parties involved. And ultimately, it worked like clockwork, and we got a deal done. And actually, in a bizarre way, the presidential elections helped because it was a compelling event to get the deal done before the presidential elections, because there was all this market speculation about potential impact to the market. Actually, it was a non-event. But regardless, we got the deal closed, simultaneously closed and signed the deal on November 2nd. But throughout that entire life cycle, I felt that we were in one team. We were part of one team as TPG and the LLamasoft leadership team.
And Razat, before we run out of time, one last question. I know the audience is very curious. What comes next for you now that you have this successful exit at LLamasoft? What can you say about what comes next?
Yeah, look, Nehal, I've had the good fortune. The last 3 years have been a lot of fun and a very positive experience. Prior to that, another 20 years of great learnings. I'm excited about the next phase. I mean, there's so much innovation happening in the tech space, as you know, and I'd love to leverage all that experience to continue to create value. So while I can't talk about the specifics, what I will say is I'm very much going to be involved in the enterprise software space, focused around digital transformation. And there's so much investments going into digital transformation that there's such a big need, and the pandemic has only exacerbated the need. But I think we need to think about how are we going about executing on those digital transformations, how we allocating resources and budgets, and how we really extracting value. And so I'm going to be in a space that's going to be dealing with that realm. You'll be hearing some announcements very shortly, and I'm really excited about also the continued partnership with TPG as well. That's great, Razat. And it was a great experience on all sides, and just a fantastic outcome to have accomplished so much in just a 3-year period. I have an eye on the clock as well. I know we're want to keep the overall day moving, and I know we're out of time. TiE team, thank you so much for the opportunity to share the story today.
What a great story, Razat and Nehal, on orchestrating a unicorn exit. Thank you.